From a clinical distance, Evelyn's story reads like a perfect psychological fracture. Prolonged coercive control, trauma-induced muteness, emotional dependency, and a desperate transfer of trust from father to outlaw. But the deeper pathology lies with the men around her. Her father displays the classic profile of a manipulator who weaponizes family bonds for self-preservation, while Luca presents the paradox of a violent protector, morally dangerous yet emotionally more regulated than the so-called respectable parent. That contradiction is what makes the story so addictive. It forces the audience to confront an unsettling truth. Safety does not always arrive in innocence, and love does not always come from the lawful. By the time the bloodline turns against itself, the real question is no longer who is guilty. It is whether Evelyn's healing can survive the cost of choosing the man who saved her.
Before subject Evelyn Cross, the marriage contract was presented, its signature field a clear psychological stressor. Her response was a practiced catatonia, a defense perfected over 13 years of elective mutism. Her father had successfully commodified her pathology. Luca Moretti, an archetype of controlled aggression, observed, awaiting the finalization of this human transaction. The equation was one of cruel simplicity: a pregnant sibling, a patriarch's failing enterprise, and the subject herself, the final asset for liquidation. In this clinical setting, saturated with leather, the terms of her disposition were finalized. For over 20 minutes, she maintained absolute stillness, her composure a textbook display of trauma response. Her posture was a fortress of control, hands clasped, gaze fixed on the desk, separating her from the man who was now her legal husband. A sharp line of light bifurcated the room, obscuring the documents she was denied access to. Ambient city noise infiltrated the space, a stark contrast to her internal dissociative state. The lawyer, Dominic, addressed her. "Do you understand the terms?" No response was elicited. As predicted, her father interjected for her. "She understands." Richard Cross's tone exhibited pronounced disdain. In public, a noted developer. Here, the operator. His Tom Ford suit served as psychological armor for such transactions. Evelyn is fully capable of grasping the proposal. The term proposal was a deliberate misnomer for a directive. Across the table, Luca Moretti's posture conveyed absolute dominance, a quiet display of his status. Younger than anticipated, approximately 32, his features were severe, suggesting a classical Roman sculpture defined by a rigid jawline and dark features. His gaze, however, was the primary tool of captivation. His eyes, a dark, near-black coffee, were unnervingly direct. He assessed her not with predatory interest, but with a detached clinical curiosity, as if examining an anomaly in a formula. "The conditions are straightforward," Dominic's voice broke the silence. The contract specified a wedding within 2 weeks. Miss Cross retained her personal assets. Mr. Moretti would provide a residence, security, and all finances. Public appearances were mandatory. "Proceed to the relevant clause," her father interrupted. A minor tremor in Richard Cross's leg betrayed a brief loss of composure, a flicker of anxiety. He awaited the security protocol. Dominic cleared his throat and read that Mr. Moretti would resolve all cross-family business conflicts and shield Miss Sarah Cross and her infant from harm. The sister's name triggered a somatic reflex. Her hand moved to her heart, an instinct from the trauma at age 12 that induced her mutism. Her father physically restrained her wrist, hissing a threat directed only at her. His whispered words were a direct ultimatum tied to Sarah. "You will do this." The leverage was clear. "Otherwise, Sarah suffers for my errors. You comprehend these men. You know their methods with her and the baby." This is classic narcissistic blame shifting. The threat was a palpable pressure on her sternum. Her father's dealings had escalated from unethical to lethal, incurring debts to dangerous individuals. This marriage was the only variable preventing violence. Her pregnant sister was the unwitting collateral. "Mr. Moretti," her father announced, "my daughter agrees." Luca's response shattered the room's tense equilibrium. Is that the case? His voice, lower than anticipated with a slight accent, cut through the tension. His gaze remained on Evelyn. I have not heard her consent. A heavy silence followed. Dominic shifted with discomfort. Her father's jaw set rigidly. A crack appeared in Evelyn's composed facade, perhaps from shock or a nascent flicker of hope. Her suppressed volition was being directly solicited. My daughter is nonverbal, her father stated, his words sharp. She has not spoken since the age of 12. As her guardian, Luca interrupted him. I am literate. He produced a mobile device, typed a message, and passed it to her. The screen illuminated. Sign language, I can learn, or this will suffice. A single gesture from Luca terminated Richard's protest. The power dynamic in the room had fundamentally shifted. Miss Cross and I need a private consultation. The hallway is sufficient for you. As her father hesitated, Luca's tone hardened. Outside. I own this property, Mr. Cross. You came to me in a state of desperation. Let us be clear on the hierarchy here. Her father rose to his feet. He paused, conflicted between his wounded ego and his survival instinct. After glancing at his daughter, he proceeded to the door. 5 minutes, he snarled. 10, Luca countered, his tone cool. You seem to require some fresh air. The door clicked shut, the lawyer following her father. She was now isolated with the man who had purchased her. Luca rose and rounded the desk. His gait was deliberate, implying immense controlled power. He stopped when she exhibited a flinch response, a clear sign of fear conditioning. Unexpectedly, he knelt to her eye level, offering the phone. This is the situation, he began softly. Your father provoked dangerous entities. His life was the price. I altered the terms. This marriage ensures his survival. He allowed the information to be processed. This was not your error, but you are the one servicing the debt. Her hand trembled as she took the device. So I must inquire, Luca said, and I need an honest answer. Are you being coerced? If you are, we will find an alternative. You are not liable for his obligations. She met his gaze, searching for deception, for the parameters of this new confinement. Men of his profile do not offer freedom, merely different forms of captivity. Yet his eyes were steady and patient. Her thumbs moved rapidly. Sarah, my sister, is with child. If I refuse, she will be harmed. Luca read the text, a muscle in his jaw tightening as he processed the data. The Valentinos. Correct. That is their modus operandi, he confirmed. She typed back, so there is no option. His response was clinical. There is always an option. Some are simply more costly. This union benefits my family, but a captive is of no strategic use to me. If you agree, you will be an equal partner. I will not be your captor, nor will I permit him to continue as yours. Her thumbs flew. Why offer this? You have no data on me. Correct, he concurred. But I recognize men like your father, and I recognize the symptoms of long-term confinement. A business card was slid across the desk. My direct number. I need your decision by tomorrow evening. The choice is yours, not his. Her thumbs typed her assessment. He will not permit me to refuse. A cold smile touched Luca's lips. Then he is about to learn about claiming things that are not his. Before the statement could be fully analyzed, he was at the door, opening it. Her father and Dominic were waiting. Our transaction is complete, Luca said. Evelyn has until tomorrow night to provide her answer. This marriage is contingent on her consent, not your decree. That is absurd. She must. Her father began, his face flushed with narcissistic rage. 24 hours, Mr. Cross. I suggest you consider your next actions carefully. Luca's focus returned to Evelyn. Evelyn, it was a pleasure. The statement felt strangely authentic. She stood on unsteady legs, the phone heavy. Observing her state, he crossed the room and gently took the phone. Their skin made contact, a brief, warm touch inconsistent with the coldness of the negotiation. "Retain the card," he said. "I suspect you will require it." Her father's ensuing silence in the vehicle was a form of psychological punishment. He was quiet until they reached their estate. His expression was a storm of rage and desperation. "The man is a predator, Evelyn. You must grasp that. Luca Moretti is not a fantasy. He is a wolf. His world is built on criminality and violence. His opponents have a tendency to vanish." She retrieved her own phone and began to type. "Perhaps one should not conduct business with murderers." The text on her screen made him recoil. "This is for Sarah, for her baby, for this family." "No," she assessed. "This is for your cowardice after you gambled with lives that were not yours." "Be careful," his voice became frigid. "I remain the head of this family. My word is law here. Your marriage to Luca Moretti is a closed subject. I will not let your newfound morality jeopardize my other daughter and grandchild." The car door slammed, its vibration a physical punctuation as he departed. In the subsequent silence, she watched him leave, then examined Luca's card. The cardstock was heavy, marked only by a phone number in raised black ink. It offered no name, no title. It offered only a variable. An hour later, Sarah located her in the garden by their mother's roses. Her sister appeared serene and maternal, one hand resting protectively over her abdomen. The subject observed her sister as a social epicenter. This state was a stark counterpoint to the subject's self-described confinement. Sarah initiated contact referencing a paternal meeting. The subject's reply was nonverbal, conveyed through her device. A marital contract was being implemented. Sarah exhibited pupillary dilation, a classic sign of shock. "With whom? Evelyn, why?" The name was Luca Moretti, to resolve a debt. "The Moretti family," she repeated, her vocal pitch escalating. "My God, Dad's involved with them?" A negative head movement and shoulder shrug was the only response. The subject's knowledge was fragmented. She had observed documents on her father's desk, correlating with months of household tension. Sarah initiated physical contact, interlocking their fingers. "You cannot consent. Refuse him. You have a choice." His threat involved collateral harm to Sarah and the fetus. Sarah's face exhibited a sudden pallor. "He can't be serious." The assertion faltered. Both understood their father's capacity. For months, the father's desperation had been escalating. This was his most extreme maneuver. "I'll devise a plan," Sarah stated. "Ben and I will disappear." The subject increased her grip pressure, typing a response. "They will locate you. Individuals like that always do. I refuse to let you live as a fugitive. So you will exchange your life for my own, in a state of captivity." It may not be a cage. The typed statement lacked conviction, conflicting with the memory of Luca's vocalization. "A partner, an equal. The choice is yours." Sarah's expression indicated intense emotional conflict before she initiated a protective embrace. "Since our mother's death, you've been my protector. Who assumes that role for you now?" The subject held her, committing the sensory data of safety to memory. Upon separating, she used her phone to redirect. "Tell me about the baby. What was the medical report?" The change of topic was permitted. For the next 20 minutes, Sarah discussed nursery aesthetics and potential names. The subject performed normative social cues. smiling, nodding. In her pocket, Luca's card was a point of intense tactile focus. She waited until midnight to initiate the call once the residence was dark. Sarah and Ben were in their designated wing. The father was isolated in his study with alcohol. The subject sat in her room, a space filled with artifacts of a former self, observing the phone. 23 hours and 47 minutes had passed since the offer. It had been 13 years since she held any belief in escape. She composed the text 3 times before sending. "This is Evelyn. I require your rationale for this arrangement." His reply was logged in under 1 minute. "This is more than a partnership. You are direct. I find that appealing." "That is not a sufficient answer." "No, you are correct." After a pause, the typing indicator appeared. "May I call? It is easier to verbalize." The subject hesitated before responding. "I cannot speak." "Understood. I will speak. You will listen. Text if a response is needed." The device vibrated before she could reconsider. She answered, holding her breath. "Evelyn." His voice, via the phone, seemed closer, its abrasive qualities diminished. "Thank you for making contact. I was uncertain you would." She remained silent. "The truth is this," he stated. "For the last 5 years, we have been transitioning into legitimate enterprises. Some operations remain illicit, I will not deceive you. But we are restructuring, laundering assets, creating a new empire. The issue is a deficit of trust. The world perceives it as a power play." He paused. The sound of liquid being poured was audible. "An alliance with your family, established wealth, an impeccable reputation. It purchases a legitimacy we cannot otherwise acquire. It provides access to circles closed to men of my background, regardless of capital. You require legitimacy. I require a sanitized name. The transaction is logical," she typed, "and following the execution of the documents." "Following the execution of the documents," he echoed slowly. "I am weary of solitude, weary of transactional relationships, weary of the fear I inspire." A brief, sharp laugh, "which is profoundly ironic, given I have just purchased a wife. But observing you today, the way you were dismissed, your views treated as an inconvenience." He left the statement unfinished. "That is not my objective. For this to work, I need a true partner, someone who will provide resistance, enforce honesty, be my anchor. You believe I am that person? I believe you survived 13 years in a system designed to erase you, and you persist. Yes, I have no doubt of your capabilities." The subject closed her eyes, combating a nascent feeling she identified as hope. "What are the terms?" "A good question." She could infer a smile. "First, you are not a prisoner. You will have freedom of movement. Security is for your protection, not your confinement." The second condition specified separate bedchambers, a boundary only she could elect to cross. He clarified the agreement was non-physical, a statement that induced a cutaneous flushing reaction. Her response was a typed, "Understood." The third was a protocol of absolute candor. Any issue must be verbalized. He stated he could not interpret subtext. Her silence was a deal breaker. He provided contact protocols, his sterile instructions punctuated by dark humor. For a moment, a smile formed on Evelyn's lips before being suppressed. His vocal tone then shifted, adopting a practiced gravity. "I am not a good man, Evelyn." He enumerated his transgressions, a history marked by violence. This, he asserted, was an immutable part of his character he would revert to if provoked. His demand for her to comprehend this was framed as an exercise in radical honesty, a test of her fortitude. She processed the data, his capacity for violence, the criminal nature of his finances, and assessed her ability to coexist with it, perhaps even leverage it. My father is also a monster. He is merely more adept at concealment. Yes, Luca concurred quietly. He is. There is one final condition. State it. My sister, I need her protected, regardless of outcome. If this contract terminates, if I am gone, Sarah and her child are to be inviolable, permanently. Done! His confirmation was instant. Anything further? Her gaze scanned the room, settling on images of a girl from school performances, a girl who once had a voice. Her focus settled on a piano. Silent for 13 years, she weighed the life she had forfeited against the one she was selecting. When is the wedding? The subsequent 2 weeks became a maelstrom of activity external to her. Her father engaged a planner who arrived with fabric swatches and floral arrangements. They fitted her for a gown, presented venue options, and offered menus for an event she did not desire. Throughout, Luca sent daily texts. Morning, what is your status? The planner suggested ice sculptures. Your assessment. Your father attempted to seat his associates with us. I refused. The seating arrangement is your decision. It is also your wedding. I understand this is overwhelming. You may still withdraw until the contract is signed. She did not respond to most texts. She existed in a liminal state, contractually engaged yet emotionally detached, bound by ink but not volition. Still, she archived every message, reviewing them at night when feelings of asphyxiation were most acute. Sarah made 3 more attempts to alter her decision. Her husband, Ben, regarded her with unconcealed pity. Her father's planning became a frantic, compensatory obsession expressed through lavish florals. In this period, she was receding, becoming quieter and less present until Luca appeared at the house unannounced. She was in the library with a book she was not processing when she detected raised voices from downstairs. Her father's sharp anger, then a deeper tone that cut through the conflict with clinical calm. Your schedule is irrelevant, Richard. I am here to see my fiancée. She is not receiving visitors. The wedding is in 5 days. She is delicate. She needs. What she requires is an exit from this gilded cage. Footsteps ascended the stairs. Where is she? She stood as the library door opened. Luca was there, and for a moment they only stared. His appearance differed from her memory, appearing less refined in dark denim and a black shirt revealing a tattoo near his collarbone. His hair was disheveled, suggesting repeated agitation. Her father remained in the background, a study in manifest anxiety. Hello, Luca said, his features softening. Pardon the intrusion. I was in the vicinity. She arched an eyebrow. Both knew this was false. His residence was across the city. Can we talk? He directed a meaningful look at her father. Now see here. It was a directive, not a query. Luca's focus remained on her. Evelyn, may we speak privately? She inclined her head. She observed her father's jaw tense, but he suppressed his protest. The door's sharp closure was a sonic intrusion into the quiet. Luca moved by the window, an agitated silhouette, verbalizing the anxiety her 3 days of non-communication had produced. Her text, I am fine, was a weak defense, which his low, confident tone dismantled. He stated the obvious. She was not fine. 5 days from a wedding to a stranger. The operator, Luca, reframed the subject's paternal arrangements as a hostile takeover of her autonomy, highlighting the complete negation of her personal volition. While the subject, Evelyn, conceded her desires were irrelevant, Luca insisted they were his sole focus. He maintained a calculated distance, a physical void intended to compel disclosure. Speak to me. The subject, however, remained fixated on a blinking cursor. a rhythmic indicator of emotions too profound for verbalization. Ultimately, she articulated her primary psychological terror. I feel as if I am being meticulously erased and no one is even watching. Luca's subsequent weighted silence was a prelude to 3 words that systematically dismantled her premise. I am watching. The subject's gaze locked with his as he elaborated, negating any possibility of his inattention. To him, she was the sole object of significance within any given environment. He posited that others leveraged her silence as a pretext for willful ignorance. Conversely, he claimed to observe the complex mechanisms of her cognition, her perception of overlooked details, and the subtle manner she preemptively met her sister's needs at dinner. Leaning closer, he issued a clinical pronouncement. You are not fading away. Though others are just blind, this declaration initiated a fracture in a belief system that had remained solidified for years. Luca then presented a strategic alternative, the cancellation of the wedding ceremony. He clarified this was not a dissolution of their union, but an elimination of the performative spectacle orchestrated by her father. He proposed the courthouse as a substitute, the simple execution of a legal document. A celebratory event he proposed could be actualized at a later date, on their own terms, with a guest manifest of their choosing. The subject's rapid typing projected her father's anticipated narcissistic rage. Let him, Luca responded with a clinical smile. He has no power here. We do. The decision was now hers, the courthouse on Saturday or the scheduled performance. Her thoughts turned to the dress, not of her choosing, and the venue, which she had never seen. She visualized the guest list, a mass of unknown entities in a maneuver designed to prove Richard Cross's daughter could secure a suitable alliance. Then she envisioned Saturday morning, herself, Luca, and a state official. Uncomplicated, authentic, hers. Yes. The monosyllabic response fundamentally altered the topography of his facial expression. When he sought confirmation, her nod affirmed the choice, followed by a typed condition. Sarah's presence was required, and they would inform her father that morning, allowing no time for countermeasures. You have a ruthless streak. I like it, he assessed, rising and extending his hand. Come on, let's drive. Her inquiry of where was met with wherever you want. She could not recall her last excursion from the residence. It had been a week, possibly 2. That is what I figured, he observed, his hand still offered between them. You are not a captive, are you? That was the agreement. He was presenting an opportunity for temporary egress from her environment. She analyzed his hand, the calluses, and a thin, white scar registering the decision it symbolized. Then she engaged. They drove, windows down, with no specific destination. In a clear transfer of situational control, Luca ceded the choice of music to her, observing silently as she navigated through various songs. He complied with every random exit she designated on a pilgrimage that concluded at a beach 2 hours north of Boston, uninhabited on a Thursday in early October. The subject had not been near water since the initial trauma, the event that bisected her life into before and after. They proceeded without verbal communication along the tide's edge, the wind agitating her hair as the ocean's acoustic output neutralized the chaos in her mind. Luca's proximity provided a stable, grounding presence amid the storm of traumatic recall. When she finally stopped at the waterline, allowing the cold surf to saturate her shoes, he moved to a position beside her. He inquired about her status. She nodded, retrieving her device. Thank you for this. He dismissed her gratitude. This is what partners do. We are not partners yet, she typed. We are close enough, he countered, pausing. He requested permission to pose a question, specifying she could refuse. Ask, she wrote. Then came the 5 words that induced motor paralysis over the screen. What happened to your voice? The subject was unprepared for this direct inquiry and had no scripted response. A non-adaptive hope that he would never raise the topic had persisted. She composed, deleted, and recomposed the cold clinical data. A vehicular accident. 13 years prior. Her mother was the operator. They encountered black ice. Her mother's death was immediate. The subject was left entrapped, sustaining fractured ribs, a collapsed lung, and a crushed larynx. The medical assessment termed her survival a miracle. Luca processed this information, his expression becoming an unreadable mask. A miracle, he echoed quietly. And you screamed. He already possessed the knowledge. He articulated how she had vocalized while trapped in the wreckage with a force that destroyed the remnants of her vocal cords. Her hands exhibited tremors too severe to reply. How could you know? Because I have seen that kind of scar before, he stated. That is not merely an injury. That is trauma made flesh. He turned to establish direct eye contact. I am sorry you survived that, and I am sorry no one ever gave you somewhere else to put that scream. His words breached an internal psychological dam, releasing a silent, uncontrolled cascade of tears. As she attempted to wipe them, he gently intercepted her hand. Hey, that is okay. You are allowed to cry, he authorized. She shook her head, retracting her hand to type through a liquid obstruction. I do not cry. Crying is for people who can speak. His rebuttal was instant and categorical. That is also a lie. The directness was a cognitive shock. Evelyn, look at me, she complied. You have been silent for 13 years. It does not mean you have no voice. It just means your world did not listen closely enough. He eliminated the remaining space between them. I am listening. I will always be listening. He vowed that any individual who failed to perceive her communication would be made to understand their error. As her vision cleared, she observed the individual labeled a monster, a criminal, offering the one asset she had always been denied. What if I'm not what you need me to be? She typed, a final expression of her self-doubt. What if you already are? He replied. They remained on the sand as the sunset projected hues of orange and rose across the sky, a visual phenomenon of a beauty that would have devastated her mother. And for the first time in 13 years, she considered the hypothesis that a new reality could be constructed from fragmented components. Saturday's arrival was highly anticipated. The morning presented with a crisp, lucid autumn light that suggested infinite possibilities. Evelyn was conscious before sunrise, observing the sky transition from indigo to gold while contending with the terror that she was about to trigger a catastrophic failure in her own life. Her phone vibrated. Morning. Are you still in? She responded without delay. Are you? He returned. Yes, I will be there at 9. Wear something that makes you feel like yourself. The concept was unfamiliar, almost subversive. She stood before her closet for 20 minutes until her hand selected a simple cream dress, acquired 2 years prior and never worn. Its hemline rested with an understated grace just below her knees. She allowed her hair to hang unconstrained, applied minimal makeup, and studied her reflection as if observing an unknown person. The woman in the mirror appeared terrified, yet for the first time in an extended period, she also appeared fully sentient. At 8:30, she knocked on Sarah's door, finding her sister already prepared, with Ben positioned behind her, his car keys visible. "You are really going to do this?" Sarah's vocalization was less an inquiry than a final, tenuous confirmation. Evelyn offered a simple nod, presenting her phone as evidence of her resolve. "Then you will want me there." Moisture was visible in Sarah's eyes, yet a smile emerged. "Of course, someone has to make sure you do not make a run for it." "I will not run." "I know." Sarah's embrace was gentle. "You're the bravest person I have ever met." The subject, of course, experienced no sensation of bravery. Her psychological state was one of pure, unmitigated terror, as if positioned on a precipice with no view of the ground below. She utilized Sarah as a human anchor in an attempt to assimilate some of her sister's composure. At 8:50, her father's voice emanated from the foyer, the familiar auditory signal of an impending storm announcing the wedding planner's presence. She was scheduled to be finalizing logistics for Wednesday, for a ceremony that was now a mental construct, a future she was actively rejecting. A text message confirmed her extraction vehicle was in position, and a dangerous pulse resonated in her throat. She collected her belongings, signaled her sister, and advanced toward the staircase, only to find her father, Richard, obstructing her egress. "And just where are you going?" The question was a sharp, abrupt interrogation. He began to enumerate her appointments for the day, constructing a cage of her scheduled obligations. Her sister's voice functioned as a shield, interrupting his verbal assault. "She is going out." Richard's gaze constricted with suspicion as he demanded her destination. Ben, Sarah's husband, offered quiet support, reminding his father-in-law of her adult status and the 4 days remaining until the event. Richard dismissed this logic with an impatient motion. At that moment, the doorbell chimed, a sound that penetrated the dense tension. Evelyn moved beyond her father's physical reach, her own hands trembling as she manipulated the doorknob. Luca stood on the porch, his dark suit tailored with the precision of armor, simultaneously intimidating and magnetic. He presented a small cluster of white roses, a conventional courtship gesture, brandished like a tactical implement. His greeting was directed exclusively at Evelyn, his focus unwavering. He then met Richard's tense query, "What are you doing here?" which included a reference to the superstition of seeing bride. Luca simply breached the threshold, uninvited, as 2 of his personnel flanked the doorway, their allegiance a source of ominous ambiguity. "The plans have changed," Luca stated, initiating a systemic shock to Richard's psychological state. "Evelyn and I are marrying today, at the courthouse." The proposition was presented as a joint escape from a public ceremony. As roses were passed to Evelyn, their texture was perceived as cold currency against her desensitized skin. Luca then extended an invitation for Richard to participate in this new framework, an offer predicated on Evelyn's passive acquiescence. A profound silence ensued as Richard's carefully maintained facade contorted from pallid shock to the mottled red of a severe narcissistic injury. His rage stemmed from the sunk cost of the performance, a $200,000 symbol of his status, now rendered inert. Luca's response was a precisely wielded counter-manipulation. "This," he declared, "is what Evelyn wants." A nonverbal ultimatum permeated the environment. Richard could either adapt to the new power dynamic or risk a more public evisceration of his ego. His initial offensive having failed, he reverted to his primary tool of control, weaponizing his language for social humiliation in a final attempt to subordinate Evelyn. Evelyn observed her father, who had orchestrated a marriage in 2 weeks, viewing her as a strategic asset. She raised her phone, an instrument of passive rebellion, angling the screen to signal her complete detachment from external judgment. In this action, she transitioned from a traded commodity to an agent of her own narrative. Richard immediately pathologized her decision as a symptom of psychosis. "He has corrupted your thinking," he projected, his finger trembling with impotent fury. Luca's voice severed the toxic diatribe, a clear warning that any further verbal assault would breach the final boundary of civility. Richard's tirade ceased abruptly. "Your daughter has made her choice," Luca affirmed, his tone unyielding. "You can honor it, or you can stay here." He imposed a 5-minute timeline for compliance. Sarah and Ben established a protective formation around her, acting as witnesses to her act of self-emancipation. Richard's aggression dissipated, replaced by the pallor of acute panic. The conflict's etiology was exposed. The Valentinos had been promised a high society wedding as part of the agreement. Luca countered that the family would receive the legal fulfillment of the contract, a marriage. He specified that the union's aesthetics were a private matter for him and Evelyn. He then offered her his arm, a tangible gesture of a new alliance. Her focus shifted from the roses, artifacts of the defunct agreement, to her sister's supportive expression before she accepted his arm. This was a physical manifestation of a loyalty transfer, a silent declaration. They bypassed her father and the planner, who held a binder of obsolete protocols, exiting the house that had been her gilded cage for 13 years. At Luca's vehicle, he opened her door, a measured display of respect. He inquired about her emotional state. Her phone provided the reply, "Ask me after." She was consciously deferring the effective processing of her own insurrection. The transit to the courthouse was estimated at 40 minutes. Luca operated the vehicle with one hand, his other resting near hers, on the console in a subtle gesture of solidarity. Their convoy was supplemented by her sister's car and a security SUV. En route, Luca reiterated that her consent was a dynamic process, subject to revocation at her discretion at any point. Evelyn signaled her comprehension. She then composed a message that reframed their entire contract. "This isn't about the debt anymore." The words induced a micro-expression of tension in his jaw. He confessed a preference for action, admitting the domain of emotion was unfamiliar territory. He articulated plainly that his involvement was volitional, not contractual, and that her acceptance of this fact was paramount. She typed her response, "I get you." Seemingly satisfied, he then preemptively acknowledged his own anticipated marital deficits, requesting that she identify these inevitable shortcomings as they arose. When asked to elaborate on his prediction of failure, he described a life of chronic solitude, unaccustomed to partnership and defined by formidable emotional fortifications. She reflected on her own fortress, constructed of silence and survival strategies, and contemplated the risk of granting another individual entry. Her typed response proposed a pact. Then, we learned together. He reached across the console, his fingers interlacing with hers in a tactile confirmation of the agreement they held until arrival. The marble courthouse projected an atmosphere of institutional gravity. A clerk directed them to the 3rd floor, where Judge Patricia Morrison began processing their documents with bureaucratic neutrality. "Are there any objections to this union?" the judge inquired, a standard legal formality. Sarah and Ben indicated none. Evelyn remained silent. Luca's voice was resolute. "No, Your Honor." He then presented a case containing 2 simple, elegant platinum bands. He had assessed her ring size with perfect accuracy. "Will these do?" he queried, his gaze meeting hers in a final, unspoken offer of egress. She gave a slight nod, accepting the smaller band. As per Luca's instruction, Judge Morrison recited a stark, contractual iteration of the vows. "Do you, Luca Moretti, take Evelyn Cross?" His reply was a constant, "I do." "And do you, Evelyn Cross, take Luca Moretti?" With trembling hands, Evelyn presented her phone to the judge. Displayed on its screen were the 3 requisite words, "I do." For a brief interval, a genuine smile appeared on Judge Morrison's face. "That's legally sufficient," she declared, before pronouncing them wed and noting a kiss was the traditional denouement. Luca merely raised an eyebrow, ceding the choice to Evelyn. She leaned forward, placing a brief, platonic kiss on his cheek. His hand came to her face as he vocalized, "Thank you for choosing me." In her periphery, Sarah's quiet weeping added emotional resonance to the event. Evelyn experienced a profound internal shift, a sensation she could only classify as the first tremor of true autonomy. They executed the legal paperwork formalizing their status as Mr. and Mrs. Moretti. In the hallway, Sarah embraced Evelyn with intense emotion. "You did it," she affirmed. Ben offered Luca a firm handshake, asking about the next step. Luca's response was elemental. "We go home." The construct of home felt alien to her. The residence she had occupied for 26 years was a theater of survival, not a sanctuary. She began to formulate that a home is not an inherited space, but a co-created one. The vehicle proceeded toward an unfamiliar district of the city. They pulled up to a modern tower in the Seaport district. Luca noted that he had acquired and completely re-engineered the penthouse level 3 years ago. He listed its features as if they were tactical assets: expansive volume, absolute privacy, and total security. He attempted to mitigate her anxiety by promising autonomous living quarters. "This is not about expectations." The elevator opened directly into the residence, which featured clean architectural lines, diffused light, and a commanding view of the harbor. The environment was a direct reflection of its occupant, a case study in controlled power. The decor was minimal but of high quality, the art selected with clear intent. It was a space designed for an individual who prioritizes substance over display. Luca began a spatial orientation. "Kitchen's there," he gestured. "Offices down that hall. Your wing is this way." He escorted her to an area designated for her use. He presented a bedroom twice the size of her former one, a minimalist space of cool grays and stark whites, with a glass wall offering an unobstructed view of the sea. "I guessed at your preferences," he stated, a hint of rehearsed unease in his tone. "If I was wrong, we can change anything. The colors, the furniture, everything." Captivated by the vista, Evelyn observed the harbor activity against the vast ocean. Her phone illuminated with her assessment. "It's perfect." A visible wave of relief passed over his features. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets in a shared silence. "Are you hungry? We can order food, or the kitchen is available to you." Her turn from the window acted as a nonverbal cue, halting his fragmented speech. Within his own controlled environment, his psychological defenses appeared to lower, revealing the man beneath. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," he admitted, the words suspended between them. "I have shackled myself to a woman I do not know. I have brought her to my hearth. I am bound to a covenant with rules I cannot comprehend." His hand moved to his neck, massaging a point of tension. "So yes, I'm nervous," he concluded. "I am too." Her typed answer created a strange symmetry. A faint smile touched her lips as she wrote, "What happens now?" "Now," he mused, "we establish the parameters. We proceed one diurnal cycle at a time. You can make your space. I've had your things brought here. I trust that was acceptable. We will share a meal. We can talk or simply exist in the quiet. Whatever feels right," he said, his gaze meeting hers. "There is no script for this, Evelyn. We are improvising as we go." "That sounds terrifying." "Yes, it does." A genuine smile finally broke through his composure. "But it is also exhilarating, is it not?" Before she could reply, his phone vibrated. A single look at the screen erased all warmth from his face, replacing it with a cold mask of authority. "What is it?" Sarah asked from the doorway. She and Ben had remained in the main living area, unmoored in this new dynamic. "Your father is demanding a sit-down with the Valentinos," Luca reported, his focus locked on his device. "He's moving to annul the marriage. He's claiming you were coerced." A sharp, cold surge of fear activated Evelyn's nervous system. Her hand shot out, her fingers gripping Luca's arm as her thumbs moved rapidly over her screen. "Can he do that?" "He can try." A muscle in Luca's jaw tensed. "But he will fail. We have witnesses, documents, and leverage he can't even imagine." "What leverage?" Ben inquired. Luca's gaze shifted to Evelyn. "How much do you know about what your father actually does for a living?" She offered a non-committal shrug, typing almost nothing. "He orchestrated my ignorance, I am certain." Securing his phone, Luca said, "Let me be direct. Your father's dealings with the Valentinos surpassed mere credit. For 3 years, he laundered their funds via his enterprise. When federal agents closed in, his resolve broke and he attempted to disengage. So their response is lethal retaliation." Sarah's hand covered her mouth. The realization hit. "My father is a criminal." "Your father is trapped," Luca specified, "and naive. The Valentinos do not forgive. This union was their compromise, acknowledging my family's power." "Richard's attempt to alter terms will be fatal," Evelyn conveyed. "And likely for Sarah," Luca appended, his tone devoid of affect. "This is the reason we must preempt a catastrophic outcome." Ben queried the method. Luca retrieved his phone to initiate a call. "Marco, I require the Richard Cross file, the full dossier from our FBI contact." "Yes, all of it." A brief silence followed. "No, I need the hard copies." "Arrange delivery to the Valentino meeting this evening." Another pause. "I intend to present Richard Cross with a dichotomy. Sanction this union for his absolution or oppose me and witness the methodical dismantling of his existence." He concluded the call, facing them. "I regret these circumstances." Evelyn grasped his arm, directing his attention. "You are coercing my father." "I am safeguarding my wife," he declared, a statement of immutable fact. "Your father constructed his own entrapment. He must bear the outcome. I will not permit him to involve you in his fall." "What if he claims coercion?" "Then I disseminate evidence of his laundering for a federal indictment, ensuring it reaches the proper channels." The severity in Luca's expression appeared to lessen. "I acknowledge he is your father. I grasp the difficult nature of this. You must accept this reality. I honor all my commitments. Should he act to nullify this marriage, I will destroy him. This is not from desire, but a protocol of our environment. A threat to my assets prompts a tenfold retaliation." Sarah emitted a strangled noise. Ben's embrace tightened. The patient, Evelyn, merely observed Luca, her perception achieving a cold lucidity. This was not the individual who offered autonomy and honored her mutism. This was the aggressor who established a dominion of terror. This was the subject of her attachment. This was her new baseline. I require time for integration. Naturally, he retreated at once, providing distance. Use all the time you require. I must manage this meeting. I anticipate returning by 8 or 9. He addressed Sarah. You and Ben will remain here. I'll arrange accommodations. Security will be present, but unobtrusive. Luca, Sarah murmured, a supplication. I implore you, do not harm him. He remains our father. I will not lay a hand on him. Luca's smile was a sharp, menacing display. Direct action is unnecessary. Verifiable truth is its own armament. His departure was rapid, a mix of costly material and controlled rage. The residence felt expansive, vacant, and perilously quiet. Sarah slumped onto the sofa. What situation has ensnared us? Ben joined her, his arm a stabilizing presence. We will resolve this. Yet the patient perceived a more profound reality. She believed she had grasped the price of her union with Luca, had acclimated to his violent milieu. To recognize the subject's pathology is one thing. To witness its application against one's own kin is another. The patient retreated to the bedroom, secured the lock, and sat on the unfamiliar bed. Her surroundings seemed alienating. She observed her reflection on the inert phone screen. The sunset colored the harbor with gold and crimson hues, a fitting metaphor for her beautiful yet brutal new environment. A text arrived. I am aware of your anger. Your response is justified. But my prior statement was accurate. I defend my acquisitions. This designation includes you, invariably, even from your own lineage. Her reply was reflexive. What if I reject your safeguarding? What if my sole desire is autonomy? The response was immediate. Then my life's work will be to demonstrate the compatibility of both states. She remained silent, gripping the device as daylight faded, contemplating if she had secured a monumental bargain or committed a critical error. 3 hours passed slowly. Her device signaled a call from Luca. She responded. Hello? His voice indicated fatigue. It is resolved. Your father has conceded. He will release a statement classifying our marriage as a mutual, spontaneous, romantic gesture. He will discreetly retract his prior marital arrangements, citing a shift in sentiment. A pause ensued. Are you still present? She affirmed. Am I permitted to return, or is more time required? She considered the subject who coerced her father for her sake, who promised liberation while constructing an ornate prison, a complex paradox of antagonist and guardian. Return home. Acknowledged. My arrival is in 10 minutes. Be advised I am exhausted and will offer poor companionship. Companionship is not my requirement. Honesty is. Veracity I can provide. Arriving 20 minutes later, his appearance suggested accelerated aging. His tie was loose, jacket removed, and his hair was disheveled from anxious manipulation. His keys sounded on the entry table. His gaze locked with hers from a distance. Your father is in a state of terror, he began, forgoing social niceties. Utterly. The authorities have multiple charges against him. He faced a mandatory sentence of 20 years. I am his sole barrier to federal incarceration. I negotiated an agreement. The incriminating material will be suppressed. He will retire, move, and live quietly, but contact with you or Sarah is forbidden. The patient displayed her device. You purchased my father's existence. I purchased your psychological security, he countered. He approached but maintained a calculated separation. I advised you of my flawed character. I do not adhere to fair play. I leverage any available asset for victory. My singular objective is to eliminate him as a source of your fear. No, we function as a partnership. He collapsed on the sofa, his demeanor revealing a crack in his defensive facade. Listen, I comprehend. If you require an exit strategy, if this exceeds your tolerance, I will still guarantee your and Sarah's protection. You must accept this fact. This is my nature. I execute the difficult decision and bear its burden. I am incapable of altering my fundamental self for you. She positioned herself near him, the proximity charged, their knees nearly touching. Her digits moved over the screen. I do not desire a different man. I require a delineation. Where is the boundary between your safeguarding and your dominance? He processed the query with focus. A valid inquiry, you are the boundary. Inform me of any transgression and I will retreat. Without protest or justification, you establish the perimeter. But what if vocalization fails me? What if I dissociate and am unable to communicate? Then we will devise alternative signals, a coded message, a gesture, a functional protocol. His stare was intense. Evelyn, my pathology is not your father's. The subject, Luca, established rapport, claiming a desire to interpret the patient's mutism, not exploit it. Unexpectedly, she seemed to confer her trust. His astonishment was palpable. She responded with a counter-proposal, stipulating her complete integration into his criminal organization as the primary term. She framed this as the basis for an authentic partnership, requiring complete access to his operations. Following a heavy pause, he acquiesced with an exhalation of apparent relief. The agreement was finalized. Comprehensive disclosure would commence at sunrise, outlining the organization, personnel, and inherent risks. The patient added a condition to retain her employment as a sign language instructor. She asserted she would not be a quiescent figure in his existence. He affirmed this was never his intention. Luca extended his hand to physically ratify their agreement. The patient perceived a violent history in his hardened skin. She appended one final stipulation. He must allow her access beyond his emotional defenses to provide support. He conceded this would present his most significant challenge. She observed his struggle, but maintained the condition. His grip tightened on hers, a proprietary confirmation of the pact as he uttered her new designation. With her other hand, she reciprocated the pressure exactly. They remained fixed in a tableau of negotiated codependence within a space that was gradually acquiring the qualities of a refuge. Externally, the urban landscape shimmered, a vast matrix of countless individual narratives. The secondary subject, Sarah, entered, her gaze noting their clasped hands before she offered a subtle, comprehending nod. She verbalized that they were resolving their issues. Luca concurred, and Sarah offered a familial kiss to Evelyn's forehead, then bid them good night. She requested they rouse her if her presence was required. After her departure, Luca rose, pulling Evelyn with him and recommending she sleep. She complied, proceeding to her room, but hesitating at the threshold. Upon looking back, Luca stood as an isolated figure, contained in his personal space with his hands concealed in his pockets. The patient returned to him, elevated herself, and initiated a slow, methodical kiss, a communication of thanks, fear, and the tentative hope for their accord stability. The action visibly startled him. In response to his query, she presented her screen, for his propriety, for his perception of her, and for his brutal veracity. He professed his inevitable inadequacy, but pledged to dedicate himself to meriting her. She countered that he had already achieved this. She then retreated to her room, the mechanism of the lock echoing in the silence, and at last permitted herself to experience the immense pressure of her decisions and altered circumstances. A severe state of cognitive dissonance is observed. The subject has aligned with the architect of her own devastation. He dismantled her history and imprisoned her family, only to present a new existence founded on violence and authority. Within this paradox, a disturbing sense of legitimacy began to emerge. His final message, which confirmed her capture, was met with her own claim, a confession that he was her sole anchor against flight. The initial week of their arrangement was a study in psychological whiplash, a surreal fusion of domesticity and a tutorial on the operational logic of his criminal enterprise. Luca's pledge of transparency was, in fact, a syllabus for systemic lawbreaking. She served as a silent observer in high-stakes negotiations, committing his lieutenants' faces to memory and learning to discern legitimate fronts from the channels used for laundering illicit funds. Over breakfast on Wednesday, Luca delivered a detached profile of an operative, Marco, whose image was displayed on a screen. He spoke of the man not as a human, but as a 20-year instrument of pathological loyalty, a weapon requiring precise aim. Evelyn examined the projection, the contradiction of a formidable physique, gentle eyes, and hands engineered for brutality. When she inquired if this operative knew of her, Luca affirmed her notoriety within his command hierarchy. He then diffused the gravity of this fact with a simple, humanizing gesture, refilling her coffee, a routine he had adopted from observing her. Her presence, he explained, had fractured syndicate norms, their unauthorized union eliciting both deference and deep-seated animosity. Responding to her query about his intended outcome, he assumed a neutral expression, professing a mere wish to insulate her from the consequences. By Thursday, this insulation was compromised. The initial assault arrived via a text message during their meal. As he moved away to answer a call, his face became placid and inscrutable. Evelyn watched through his office's glass partition as he transformed. The polished operator receded, replaced by a more primal and menacing entity. He returned 20 minutes later, his jaw rigid with cold fury. Sarah voiced her distress, their continued presence rationalized only by the formidable security of Luca's residence. Luca dismissed the incident with the sterile explanation that the matter was being addressed. A colleague, he stated, had made an offensive comment labeling Evelyn a liability. When Ben requested the individual's name, Luca refused, stating the matter was now resolved. The chilling finality of his term lingered, a stark illustration of language used to sanitize aggression. She demanded the truth through her device. Luca's gaze met hers as he outlined his protocol. Any sign of disrespect aimed at her, be it a threat, an insult, or defiance, would be met with his personal intervention. This decree, he stated, was now universally understood. Her follow-up question regarding his methods was answered by a silence more potent than any verbal response. He confessed to having delivered a pointed lesson on the consequences of challenging his authority. The admission was underscored by the sound of Sarah's fork falling, a somatic reaction to the ambient tension. Ben maintained a prudent silence. For Evelyn, the suffocating parameters of her agreement became agonizingly apparent. She was in a new cage where security was a product of violence. Her typed query was blunt. Did you end his life? The negation was immediate. He conceded, however, to inflicting a grievous but non-fatal injury, an action he deemed justified and without remorse. He refused to repeat the man's words, dismissing the slur as unworthy of repetition. At this, she retreated to the refuge of her room before she began to tremble. A quiet knock on the door. It was Luca's voice, a study in control, requesting entry. Her silence served as his consent. He entered with the cautious deliberation of someone approaching a cornered creature, maintaining a calculated distance. After sitting, he then requested her current psychological state. Her lengthy, typed answer articulated the chasm between the concept of his violence and the visceral shock of its manifestation. She conveyed a profound confusion, a feeling that she was the catalyst for the brutality. He corrected her at once, deflecting culpability from her person to the man's act of disrespect. He closed the distance between them, his attention absolute. He conceded her circumstances were anomalous and the psychological toll must be extraordinary. When she asked if this was his new protocol for resolving disputes, he answered with detached reasoning. The retribution, he clarified, was contingent entirely on the rank of the offender. An insult from a civilian would merit no response. An equivalent slight from within his ranks would receive the same violent lesson. In his sphere, he explained, deference was the sole valid currency. Allowing her to be disparaged would signal weakness, a failure to protect what was his. So, I am an asset, she typed. His correction was incisive. You are my wife. All other variables, he declared, were inconsequential. The logic caused her to flinch. This justification of cruelty as a mode of protection was a disturbing parallel to her father's own rhetoric. The toxic reasoning of a man who masked selfish desires as sacrifice. How can I be certain you are not merely him in a different form, she wrote. The parallel seemed to momentarily stun him. His voice, when it returned, was a bare whisper. Like whom? She typed her father's name, forging a direct link between Luca's control and a tyranny she had intimately known. He faced the window, the ensuing heavy silence serving as a prelude to his rebuttal. He turned back, acknowledging his intentions remained unsubstantiated claims. True trust, he proposed, must be earned through time and proven by acts of self-sacrifice made to preserve her autonomy. He then established a stark, brutal boundary between his own code and that of her father. While her father saw her silence as a vulnerability to exploit, Luca professed to see it as a language to be understood. While her father used his affection for Sarah as leverage, Luca viewed his duty to shield Sarah as sacrosanct. One union was a performance, he declared. This was a covenant. This also registers as a strategy, she typed. He did not refute the assessment. He granted that manipulation was a skill developed from necessity. Yet he contended if she were intended as a mere puppet, his tactics would be far less refined. Total isolation, perpetual monitoring, and the cultivation of complete dependency. He was, by contrast, presenting her with the inverse: autonomy, information, and the capacity for choice. This was not the behavior of a collector securing a trophy, but of an individual pursuing an equal. Her gaze lowered to her phone, the medium for their silent dialectic. The insight settled with a quiet weight. He had made no move to confiscate it, sever her worldly connections, or compel her obedience. He had opted for discourse over domination. I require time to process. His consent was unhesitating. Take whatever time you require. He paused at the door, a silhouette against the light. If it is any consolation, I am navigating this alongside you. This is new territory for me. To articulate my motives, to justify my actions to another. The sensation is foreign, but I persist because you are owed an understanding of the world you now occupy. Alone, Evelyn was left with her thoughts, her device, and the oppressive framework of her marriage. Finally, she sent a text to Sarah. Am I becoming unhinged by staying here? Sarah's reply was immediate. I cannot say. It's possible. But I observe how he watches you. as if you are a work of art he is terrified of damaging. Father never regarded anyone with such reverence. He is still capable of breaking me. Sarah responded, True, but that implies his own destruction would be simultaneous. Whether this was a comfort or a different kind of warning, Evelyn was uncertain. Later, near 10 o'clock, Luca appeared at her door, holding a thick dossier. This file contains every one of my associates, he stated, their identities, functions, and capacity for violence. I require you to memorize them, to distinguish ally from enemy, to recognize the faces of those who might use you as a tool against me. He handed her the file and a second phone, its design more utilitarian than any commercial model. The red icon is a distress signal. Activate it, and my security detail will converge on your position in less than 3 minutes. Its GPS is perpetually active, constantly monitored. If you are ever endangered, this device will guide me to you. She accepted them, their physical weight an emblem of their significance. You anticipate an event. His reply was pragmatic. I anticipate that shifts in power breed instability, and our union has disrupted the entire hierarchy. He rubbed his neck. I am not attempting to frighten you. I am attempting to equip you. There is a distinction. Is there? Yes. Frightening you involves maintaining your ignorance to ensure dependency. Preparing you is an act of trust in your ability to process truth and respond. His eyes remained fixed on hers, unwavering. I trust you, Evelyn. Against all reason, and despite every cause you have for suspicion, I am placing my survival in your hands by admitting you to my world. A profound internal defense mechanism shifted, a long-standing wall finally fracturing. She raised the new phone. Demonstrate the alarm's function. He complied, guiding her through its features, having her rehearse its activation and deactivation, while he described the response protocol. Then, in an act of deference, he sat on the floor as she reviewed the dossier, answering her typed questions with quiet, inexhaustible patience. That individual is Vincent Calibri, he said when her finger paused on a photograph. He controls the North. An old-school traditionalist, he trusts no one under 40. He opposed our marriage, deeming me too young, but the man adheres to an inflexible code. He will not trouble you. And this man, she indicated a thin subject with ice-cold eyes. Case file, Tommy Ritchie. Classification, mercenary operator. His psychological profile indicates a transactional rather than familial allegiance structure. Contracted by the Valentino organization, an allied faction, he represents a calculated, known risk. The assessment proceeded through 30 additional subject files, a spectrum of dispositions from benign to overtly hostile. By midnight, the subject, Evelyn, exhibited cognitive saturation, perceiving the dossiers as a singular, threatening gestalt. That is sufficient for tonight, Luca stated, rising. The remainder will be presented on Saturday. Her focus locked onto him. Saturday. The annual charity gala, a planned social ritual where all significant families would convene. It was, he explained, a stage for performing civility, concealing murderous pathologies beneath $1,000 suits. He observed the subject's escalating anxiety. This pace is rapid, I concede, but your concealment is a mutual liability. They require a visual confirmation of this union to comprehend the absolute nature of my protection. She registered profound helplessness, lacking the social schema for such an environment. Fortunately, he noted that deficit is shared by half the attendees. They merely excel at simulating social competence. A faint smile registered on his lips. I will maintain constant proximity. You need not vocalize. Your presence is a sufficient message. Permit their observation. That is your sole function. Should that prove insufficient, if an individual, then I will manage the situation. It is that simple. He redirected her focus. Saturday, he acknowledged, would present a challenge. Uncomfortable, perhaps fear-inducing. Yet she would not be isolated. Marco would attend. 3 security personnel and me. If you require egress at any point for any cause, we will depart. Your safety supersedes all business objectives. She felt an impulse to project competence, to prove her belonging in his world. In reality, a deep-seated fear was intensifying within her. She presented her phone. What is the appropriate attire? His expression softened. Select the garment which most effectively induces a feeling of power. The following morning, a stylist arrived with an overwhelming collection of gowns, all tailored, aesthetically pleasing, valuable, and disorienting. Sarah, 7 days from parturition, supervised with the vicarious pleasure of one observing her sister's new, high-risk glamour. That one, Sarah indicated, gesturing to a dark green gown with fluid, silk-like movement. Don it, Evelyn complied. The dress fit as if custom-made, accentuating a latent strength and projecting an image of untouchable elegance. Perfect, the stylist murmured, the archetypal Mrs. Moretti. The name felt like an ill-fitting persona, a role within another's narrative. But when Luca arrived and observed her in the dress, his reaction triggered a positive physiological response in her. Wow, he uttered, before attempting to regain his composure. My intention was to say, you appear, that is. He paused, unable to formulate the words. You will be the most compelling female subject in the room. Her response was typed rapidly. Your assessment is compromised. Entirely, but that does not invalidate the observation. From the sofa, Sarah's laughter was audible. This cloying display insults us veterans of long-term marriages who argue over domestic trivialities. Oh, we have our conflicts, Luca retorted. They simply concern different territory. Conflict typically requires verbalization, Sarah observed. Rest assured, Luca said, his gaze fixed on Evelyn with an expression of pure devotion. She communicates her points with absolute clarity. That night, Evelyn's dream state centered on the ball. She was in a hall of specters, aware of her husband's transgressions, her father's failings, and her own complicit silence. Their judgment was based on a hidden protocol, and upon her failure, Luca's world disintegrated. She awoke at 0300 hours with acute tachycardia, finding Luca in the unlit living area with his laptop. He looked up as she neared. Insomnia! She shook her head. The same. Sit here. He indicated the space next to him. Once she was seated, he adjusted the screen for her view. I am reviewing a downtown property for a new community center. A philanthropic endeavor to develop the city, not merely exploit it. She moved closer to examine the schematics and typed, Motive? Because you inquired how I differ from your father. This is the difference. Your father was an extractor. I aim to be a constructor. He simulated benevolence while committing terrible acts. I aim to become a good man by performing good acts. He closed the laptop. And because your presence creates a drive for self-betterment, a feeling that is maddening, draining, and quite possibly the most critical event in my life, I never requested that you change. No, you requested honesty. The truth is I had grown weary of the man I was. For the first time in an extended period, she was a catalyst for new behavior. In the low urban light, she observed the fatigue on his face, the stubble of his beard, the disorder of his hair. He seemed authentic, vulnerable. Her fingers came to rest over his on the laptop's metallic surface. His gaze fell to their overlapped hands, then rose to meet hers. "On Saturday, you will be extraordinary," he whispered. "More than that, you will enter that space and demonstrate to them exactly why you were my selection." How could he possess such certainty? "Because I have witnessed you navigate a living hell with grace." A room of judgmental sociopaths was nothing by comparison to 13 years of imposed silence. She wished she could internalize his confidence. Instead, she maintained contact with his hand as the city lights diffused. Saturday arrived, stark and certain. A team appeared to handle her hair, cosmetics, and nails with clinical professionalism. From her seat, Sarah offered a steady stream of validation. "You are a legend from the silver screen," she commented as the look was finalized. "A silent film actress." They had no need for dialogue. Their eyes conveyed the entire narrative. Evelyn summoned a smile, a brittle mask over the terror seizing her chest. The gown was an excess, the footwear a liability, the makeup a theatrical facade. Her reflection was an unknown actor playing a role. At 1800 hours, Luca appeared in a tuxedo of flagrant expense, emanating a lethal self-assurance. "Ready?" he inquired. Her nod was a falsehood, betrayed by the rigidity of her spine. Luca perceived her anxiety and presented a final chance to retreat to her previous existence. She declined. She typed that she must see the event through to establish her new position. A part of her was assimilating the persona he had constructed. He then kissed her, a deliberate act to ratify their pact, a feigned surrender of dominance. The downtown hotel projected an atmosphere of inherited wealth. They were intentionally late, a calculated assertion of power. "Let them wait," Luca murmured, clarifying the strategy behind their timing. Marco confirmed all security measures were in place. A firm hand on her lower back, Luca guided her into the hostile assembly displaying his prized acquisition. Their entry prompted a ripple of hushed commentary. An older male, Vincent, approached with a practiced congratulatory statement. "My wife," Luca stated, the two words a definitive and implicit claim of possession. Vincent's gaze remained fixed, his assessment of her undisguised. At the mention of her father, she exhibited an involuntary flinch. Luca intervened, his tone smooth as he systematically deconstructed the man's social standing in a subtle power play. Following the exchange, Luca's hand tightened on her spine, a proprietary grip masquerading as support. For the subsequent hour, she remained a silent effigy while he moved among the predators, vocalizing for them both. An individual observed that her quiet demeanor must be an asset. Luca's reply was cold and direct. "She deploys words with intent," he said, converting her silence into a form of power that subdued the other man. The ballroom became an incubator of intense scrutiny, and her composure began to fail. Luca sensed her increasing agitation as her gaze locked on an improbable sight. Her father, positioned across the crowded room. He seemed diminished, a phantom of the figure in her memory. The instant they made eye contact, Richard Cross began moving toward them, desperation apparent on his face. Luca shifted to intercept him, a physical barrier enforcing their contract. Luca spoke in a low, venomous tone. "You bartered her away." Richard paid him no mind, his gaze beseeching Evelyn, attempting to invoke a paternal authority he had long since abdicated. Though her hands trembled, Evelyn met his gaze and executed a slow, conclusive shake of her head. He seemed to collapse, completely broken, and for a brief moment she felt a familiar pang of conditioned empathy. But the memory of 13 years of non-communication resurfaced, extinguishing the guilt. Luca took her arm to guide her away, and at that precise moment, the room erupted with the sound of shattering glass and gunfire. The environment descended into a chaos of screams. Before she could react, Luca propelled her to the floor, shielding her with his body. Marco was present in an instant, weapon drawn, his shouts merging with the deafening sound. Her heart rate escalated dramatically as the threat became terrifyingly real. "Extract her," Luca commanded, but she clung to him, a primitive fear compelling her to refuse separation from his side. He hesitated, conflicted for a second before rescinding the order. "She remains with me," he growled. As they moved toward a secure corridor, a violent, uncontrollable tremor overtook her body. The image of him being shot repeated in her thoughts, a sharp and unfamiliar type of dread. His lieutenant speculated it was the Valentinos, but Luca remained unconvinced. "This was intended to dissolve our alliance," Luca analyzed. His hand remained on her, but his entire demeanor had solidified into something cold and brutal. "They will be held accountable," he vowed, his voice pure retribution. A 3-vehicle escort secured their transit. The subject was catatonic, experiencing auditory artifacts from the traumatic event. Luca maintained tactile contact, a firm, grounding pressure on her knee. His touch was now perceived not as confinement, but as a stabilizing force. Upon their return, his personnel secured the perimeter as he made repeated inquiries into her physical state. Her somatic tremors, however, remained uncontrollable. "I'm all right," her device communicated, a clear dissimulation. Rejecting the data with a raw voice, he paced with the agitation of a caged subject. "This was my failure," he stated. "Your protection is my sole responsibility." He systematically deconstructed his own security protocols until Marco confirmed the location was sterile. The update provided no mitigation for Luca's agitated state. "Establish total surveillance," he commanded. "This will not be repeated. Ever." "Initiate lockdown," he ordered, before positing a theory. "This was the Valentinos," Marco interjected, offering an alternative analysis. "Or it's a manipulation," he proposed, "by a party who would benefit from open conflict." Luca's pacing ceased as he shifted from an emotional to a strategic cognitive state. Marco supplied a name, the Calabresi, noting their objective was to incite internecine warfare. Luca's directive was clinical. Obtain proof immediately. Consolidate all intelligence, and prepare our assets for a preemptive strike. Once Marco departed, Luca's command persona receded, revealing a vulnerability he exposed to the subject alone. "You should leave," he stated, a clear test of her allegiance. Her negative headshake indicated a conscious acceptance of the associated risks. The reality was more difficult than anticipated, she conceded, but her decision was irreversible. "I'm staying," her screen displayed. He appeared confused by her logic. Any rational actor would flee. But her decision was emotionally driven, fixated on the memory of him using his body as a shield. That was sufficient data. He was a dominant individual who perceived her as an asset to be protected at any cost. The fear in his eyes had not been for a broken treaty. It was for her. Her fingers articulated the data his body had already provided. "You would have taken a bullet for me." He attempted to reframe the action as duty, but a single word manifested on her device, seemingly of its own accord: "Love." The instant it appeared, she wished to retract it. Luca exhibited a complete freeze response. "Evelyn," he vocalized, her name saturated with overwhelming affect. I am deficient in this, in emotional processing, in verbalization. But tonight, my only thought was that if you were harmed, my existence would terminate. It has only been 2 weeks. The attachment is irrational, but you have become the central axis of my world, and I don't know the protocol. She eliminated the space between them, entering his personal field. She then rose on her toes and initiated labial contact. The kiss was not tentative. It was a nonverbal declaration of all her unexpressed data. He responded instantly, securing her against his torso. The intensity increased, a collision of her 13 years of elective mutism and his chronic isolation, their shared terror acting as a catalyst. They broke contact, anoxic, foreheads pressed together. "Are you certain?" he whispered. "This action is irreversible, Evelyn. We cannot return to separate quarters." She retrieved her phone, her other hand clutching his shirt with acute dependency. "I have never been more certain." He kissed her again, this time with a tenderness that induced a brief respiratory arrest. He then lifted and transported her toward his bedroom. She experienced a fleeting moment of derealization before sensory input overwhelmed her. His bedroom was larger, dominated by the bed and a familiar window wall. He placed her on its edge, then established a careful distance. "We can cease activity," he informed her, his respiration unsteady, his eyes dark. "At your discretion. I require a method for you to signal negation, should you choose to." She processed this, then activated her phone screen with one word. "Red." "This is the signal for total cessation," she communicated. Her nod was a firm contract he would adhere to. Yellow indicates deceleration. Green indicates proceed, like a traffic signal. A faint smile registered on his mouth. "I can operate within these parameters. What is our current status?" Her response was instantaneous. Green. What commenced was uncoordinated and desperate, punctuated by a spike of anxiety when her communication device was lost in the bedding. Yet beneath the chaotic urgency was a deep tenderness, observed as his fingers mapped the scars on her neck and the psychological wounds beneath. He was patient during her withdrawals, allowing her to recalibrate. The bond being formed was authentic, raw, and potent. Afterward, enclosed in his bed sheets, Evelyn experienced an emotional exposure she had prevented for 13 years. It was a conscious surrender of control, based on the trust he would not exploit it. "Are you okay?" Luca whispered, his fingers tracing patterns on her skin. Her hand reached for her device. The condition was far more than okay. It was definitive. A soft kiss to her temple served as confirmation. An alert from Luca's phone shattered the stasis, the displayed text inducing an immediate visceral shock response. "What is wrong?" Evelyn adopted a defensive posture, sitting upright. "Marco has new intelligence." All warmth had evacuated his voice. The assailant was not Valentino's. An external contractor was hired, someone who wants our syndicates at war. "Who?" "Your father." Each word impacted her like a kinetic force. Evelyn could only stare, in a state of cognitive denial. Her frenetic typing was a physical rejection of an unacceptable truth. The cognitive dissonance resolved into a traumatic certainty. Luca's withdrawal created a tangible psychological gulf between them. The clinical assessment of Richard: if possession through the union is denied, annihilation is the protocol. He would orchestrate conflict, ensure my termination, and then perform bereavement. Denial. "No, that is an impossibility. He is my father." The subject's trauma bond is presenting clearly. He struggles to assign motive to the homicidal impulse, a reclamation of power, the erasure of a perceived disgrace. Luca's psychological turmoil manifested in agitated, clipped movements as he dressed. Evelyn, your diagnosis is flawed. He is a puppeteer who liquidates all threats to his control. A defense of her paternal schema rose in her, but Luca's evidence was absolute. It was a reality she had actively suppressed for years. Her father had leveraged her life for his own security, and when the transaction failed, he chose annihilation over defeat. Through a blur of tears, she typed, "What is the protocol now?" Luca stopped, his expression hardening into an impenetrable mask. "What is your assessment of my intended action? You're going to terminate him? He engineered an attempt on your life tonight. He paid an agent to fire into a crowd to start a war. So, yes, that is my intention." He stated it as a foregone conclusion. "Unless you countermand me." She observed him, unable to reconcile the tender partner of moments ago with the detached arbiter before her now. The choice he presented was a source of profound cognitive dissonance. Veto my decision, and he lives. I will develop a non-lethal alternative. I can make him disappear, neutralize him financially, destroy his reputation, but he will remain alive. He folded his arms. "This is your decision, and you will resent me for it." "No, I will honor your choice. The distinction is important." He returned to the bed, the psychological gulf between them unchanged. "Evelyn, he is your father. I recognize the gravity of this. But we now have an accurate profile of the man. If he remains active, he is a threat to you, to Sarah, to our collective future." She hugged her knees, a self-soothing gesture against the overwhelming new information. She tried to align her memory of her father with the monster who would sanction a mass casualty event. She searched for an outcome she could psychologically tolerate. Finally, she asked, "What if it were your father?" Luca's laugh was a sharp, hollow burst of sound. "My own father contracted my death at 19, judging me too ambitious. He was deceased within 3 months, so my case study is no guide for you. Do you have regrets?" "Every day." His gaze unfocused, directed at a point in the distance, and I would not hesitate to repeat the action. "Some individuals are poison, Evelyn. Their removal is a requisite for survival." An intrusive image of her father's face appeared in her mind. The frantic expression in his eyes, his words of affection conflicted with years of his leveraging her silence against her. Love and poison, she concluded, were not mutually exclusive concepts. Her fingers moved with deliberation. "I will not request his death, but I will not request that you preserve his life. Do what is necessary for our security. I trust you. That is inequitable. It makes you complicit, I know. But I cannot function as his judge, nor can I be his savior. Therefore, I am choosing to trust your judgment." Luca remained motionless for a moment, then gave a single, decisive nod. "Understood. I will handle the matter." He rose and completed dressing. "I must make arrangements. Attempt to rest. I will be unable to." "No, I as well." He paused in the doorway. "For the record, I am sorry that this is your reality and that your father is this man. I'm sorry there is no non-traumatic path through this." A reply was formulated, but no words could traverse the new chasm between their intimacy and the lethal action he was now commanding. He left, and she remained alone with the cold certainty her father would not survive the night. Sleep did not come. Instead, she dressed and found Luca in the main living area, pacing while speaking in clipped Italian on his phone. She sat on the couch to wait. He registered her presence with a look of surprise, but continued his call, pulling her into his physical space, a steady anchor while he orchestrated the night's grim logistics. By approximately 0300 hours, the calls had ceased. He wiped a hand across his face. "The objective is met," he murmured. "Terminated. It will be ruled a suicide. Corroborating evidence linking him to the assault will surface tomorrow. The accepted narrative will be an inability to face his own actions." Evelyn registered only a void. This emptiness proved more alarming than grief would have. A daughter's expected response was absent. In its place, a null state. How do I avoid this outcome? This cold vacancy. Luca intensified his hold. Because you post the question, because you observe what this life does to the psyche. Such self-awareness functions as your defense mechanism. The ones who hollow out have stopped perceiving their own spiritual decay. You are not at that stage, not even close. On what do you base this? Because you consented to your father's termination, and your immediate thought is to question your morality. A true sociopath never questions. She settled against him as the architecture of her new reality solidified. Her father was dead by her husband's hand, a verdict she ratified with non-action. "My apologies," Luca breathed. "I know it is insufficient, but it is sincere." She composed her reply. "Do not apologize for being my shield. Apologize for the weapon that compelled you." Agreed. My regret is for this existence, and that your father couldn't tolerate your liberation. Was his assessment of you as a manipulator accurate? No. Luca met her gaze directly. You forged your own path. I merely presented the options. You made the selection. That is not manipulation, that is agency. Then account for this sensation, this feeling of erasure, as you reconstruct my world. You are not disappearing, he corrected. You are being excavated from beneath the weight. She felt a desperate need to believe him, that this numbness was a prelude to pain, that she remained intact under the wreckage. Yet in the pre-dawn stillness, the gravity of her father's death fractured her conviction. Luca's phone vibrated. He glanced at it, his features hardening. Another complication. What is it? Sarah. She is in labor. Ben's message. They are en route to the hospital. The information sliced through her mental fog. One life extinguished as another commenced. The stark symmetry between her father's death and a new birth was profound. We need to leave. Are you certain? If you require solitude. She was already standing, preempting him. Her tie-sank was firm. My sister needs me. Let us depart. The journey to the hospital was a surreal blur. Luca's hand remained on hers, his thumb tracing slow patterns, a grounding stimulus against her internal chaos. A security vehicle with Marco and another operative followed, a grim reminder that even childbirth necessitated armed oversight. They located Ben in the waiting area, pacing, his appearance disheveled with panic. She has been in labor for 4 hours, he reported, his voice strained. They claim it is typical, but her pain is immense. I am helpless. His focus shifted to Evelyn. What transpired? You both appear as if you've encountered a wraith. It is complex, Luca interjected. I will explain later. Which room? Room 304 for family only. Then I qualify as family, Luca asserted, steering Evelyn to the elevators. Ben trailed them, his anxious monologue about agony and contractions, making Luca seem pallid. Inside the room, Sarah was a study in torment, her grip whitening the bed rail. But her eyes locked on Evelyn, her own suffering momentarily forgotten. What is wrong? She gasped. You look. Has something else occurred? Evelyn looked to Luca, a silent inquiry passing between them. He offered a slight confirmatory nod. She took out her phone, typing words that were stark and clinical. Father is gone. He took his own life. We can discuss it later. Concentrate on yourself and the infant. Sarah's eyes widened, then filled with tears. Oh, Evelyn. A spasm of pain consumed her response. The subsequent 6 hours were a strange fusion of visceral struggle and medical procedure. Evelyn provided a calm anchor amid her sister's tempest. Luca observed from a corner, a silent study in managed tension and constant vigilance. Ben cycled between dread and elation. A nurse broke the stasis, announcing the police were there for Evelyn. That is not an option. Luca's voice was flat, devoid of affect. She is with her sister. They will have to wait. Sir, it concerns a death investigation, I said, Luca reiterated. They will wait. The sheer authority in his tone permitted no debate. The nurse withdrew. At 2:47 that afternoon, Sarah delivered a daughter, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with dark hair and a powerful cry. They named her Emma Catherine. When the nurse placed the infant in Evelyn's arms, the psychological defenses she had erected against her trauma simply dissolved. This perfect, small being, oblivious to her grandfather's ruin and born into a fractured world, possessed an innocence Evelyn felt a fierce, primal need to protect. Her gaze lifted to Luca. He was observing her, the typical severity in his expression replaced by pure tenderness. She is extraordinary, he said softly, as is her aunt. Nearby, a depleted but radiant Sarah smiled. You two should have one. The child would be beautiful. Sarah, Ben gently chided with a chuckle. Allow them a moment. It has only been a fortnight. I am merely making an observation. Note how he watches her holding Emma. The man is a born father. A faint heat rose in Luca's neck, but he offered no denial. His gaze remained on Evelyn's, holding a question he would not voice. Later, with mother and baby asleep, they stood on a terrace under a twilight sky. After being awake over 30 hours, she felt unmoored in this new reality defined by paternal absence and personal transformation. Holding her niece was both a comfort and a renewed source of torment. You held her with innate ease, Luca noted. Children were a recurring dream, she typed, but one I considered unattainable. For what reason? What man would choose a mute wife with my kind of past? I did, he replied, his tone final. Including the past, our marriage was initially a transaction. I married you because you inspired in me a desire to be better than I was. The politics served as a convenient pretext. He turned to fully face her. Evelyn, I recognize the cost of this day to you. You are navigating an unimaginable ordeal, but I must state this now. She waited. Seeing you with Emma, it clarified something for me. I desire that life with you. Not immediately, only when and if you are prepared, but it is my objective to construct a real family together, a chaotic, warm family, not the sterile arrangement of my own upbringing. Tears blurred her phone's screen. My father is dead. You ended his life, and I permitted it. How can we build from that foundation? The same way as anyone, he replied. One choice at a time. We err, we correct, and we endeavor to surpass our predecessors. His hands framed her face. Your father determined his own end. His choices are not our legacy. We will write our own. But what if I am too compromised to choose correctly? Then we will be compromised in unison. That is the function of a partnership. She yielded to his hold, accepting the embrace on a city street as life flowed around them, unaware. An idea sparked within her. Survival was possible. From the destruction, something new could be constructed. She could advance, not remain paralyzed by the past. It is time, Luca said gently. I am taking you home. You require sleep. As do you, she wrote. True, he conceded, but I cannot rest until you are secure. They proceeded into the growing darkness, words no longer necessary. Inside the penthouse, she bypassed her own bedroom and went directly to Luca's, getting into his bed, still wearing the clothes of her former life. He followed silently, drew her close, and they lay in the dark, attuned to the rhythm of each other's breathing. I love you, Luca's voice fractured the quiet. The timing is catastrophic. The circumstances are wrong, but the fact remains, and you must hear it. Half conscious, she located her phone, typed 3 words, and displayed the lit screen. I love you too. He held her closer, acknowledged. She rested her head on his chest, and for the first time since the event, an emotion other than fear, shock, or grief emerged within her. It was hope. The authorities could be deferred until morning. The consequences of her father's end could also wait. The task of forging a new existence would begin with the sunrise. For tonight, she was under the protection of a man who had taken a life for her and would do so again. A man who offered her agency when all others had denied it, and who regarded her silence as sacred, not a deficit to be filled. For now, this was sufficient. 3 days later, the repressed grief ambushed her without warning during a routine police interview. Evelyn was in a sterile, impersonal room with Luca and his lawyer present as a detective inquired about her father's mental state before his death. Her typed answers were brief and clinical. The detective then slid a photograph across the table. Her father, captured smiling at a fundraiser years prior. This was the subject before his psychological decline, before the pathology consumed him. A silent, violent sob convulsed through her. Her hand shot to her mouth to suppress a sound she could not make. 13 years of aphonia had erased the muscle memory of crying. Her entire frame was seized by soundless agony. Luca's arm was there instantly, a protective barrier. We are concluded here, he said, his tone glacial. My wife has just buried her father. If you require more, schedule it for another day. Mr. Moretti, we must. I said, we are concluded. He rose, pulling Evelyn with him, supporting her weight. All future communication will be through counsel. They reached the vehicle just as her emotional regulation failed. Within the severe concrete of the garage, Luca simply embraced her as she wept, her body racked by silent, intense spasms. The subject mourned the individual who was simultaneously her guardian, captor, and tormentor. Her grief was a tangled, paradoxical state, with no resemblance to cinematic sorrow. It was a composite of fury and loss, liberty intertwined with guilt, and the acute awareness that the dead offer no absolution, making closure unattainable. I am present, Luca murmured, administering tactile comfort. Release it. Purge it all. The acute episode subsided after 20 minutes, replaced by a profound emotional vacuum. Upon separating, his shirt was saturated, and a severe fatigue enveloped her. She had not felt so psychologically vulnerable since the initial assault. Her hands shook as she retrieved her device. I did not anticipate this level of distress. He was your progenitor. Such pain is a normal response. Yet he intended to terminate me. And you. Why is his absence a void? Because affection is irrational, he stated. One can detest an individual's actions while mourning their former self. Both realities can coexist. She rested against the vehicle, her focus on the severe angles of the structure's ceiling. What is the duration of this state? The prognosis is uncertain. Perhaps years, or the injury becomes chronic. One simply develops a greater capacity to bear it. He remained with her, a stabilizing presence. My own father expired 8 years prior. He still manifests in my dreams. At times I wish for an alternate history. Do you lament his termination? I lament the circumstances that necessitated the action, he clarified. The two are not synonymous. In that instant, she cognitively grasped the differentiation. The gap between remorse for an act and remorse for a reality that permitted no other path. She had not desired her father's death. It was the sole outcome ensuring Sarah's security, her own survival, and a life free from his coercive influence. Her distress was contained, not neutralized. A heavy silence dominated the return journey. In the foyer, Marco's expression showed grave foresight, causing Luca visceral unease. "What is the situation?" he asked. "A conference with the Valentinos tomorrow. They disavow the assassination attempt, asserting they have proof Richard Cross acted unilaterally, which is a precise assessment of events," Luca affirmed. "Correct, but they also contend the marital contract is nullified, citing the unsanctioned elimination of her father. They term it a breach of the pact." Luca's laugh was a sharp, empty sound. Predictable. Exploit any crisis. His focus shifted to Evelyn. "Are you prepared for this engagement, or do you require more recovery?" She lifted her device. "I am prepared. What is one more psychological lesion?" "That is my partner." He touched his lips to her temple, then refocused on Marco. "Arrange it. A non-aligned venue. Security must be absolute. And prepare the dossier on Richard's betrayal." The conference was set for the following evening at a site in the North End, Valentino territory. The day was devoted to strategic planning, as Luca refined his tactics with Marco in council, leveraging obligations from allies to alter the power dynamic. Evelyn observed him, seeing the detached rationality of his world, as if viewing a sovereign manipulating assets on a board. "You are observing me," he commented, his gaze locked on the display. Her digits moved swiftly on the screen. "I am conducting an observation. You granted me permission, a fair statement. And what conclusions has your analysis yielded? That your capacity for harm is greater in diplomacy than with a firearm." An authentic smile formed on his lips, an infrequent occurrence. "That is the most favorable assessment I have received this week." That evening, she donned her psychological armor, a severe black suit sourced by Sarah. It was a uniform for psychological warfare, a declaration she was not an expendable asset. With hair unbound and features natural, she met the gaze of the figure in the mirror. The woman reflected was transformed from the subject of 6 weeks ago. She was more resilient, honed by trauma, and had rejected her former passivity. "Attired for conflict, I perceive," Luca noted from the doorway. "Is that not the nature of this encounter?" "Yes, it is." He approached, adjusting her collar with a minor motion. "Your verbal contribution is unnecessary. Your presence is a sufficient statement. Merely exist as a symbol of unwavering intent and permit me to be the active agent. What if they attempt to use me as leverage against you? That would constitute a terminal strategic error." A profound coldness entered his expression. "The period where you could be threatened without consequence is over." The restaurant had been converted into a fortified, isolated environment. Guards were posted at all entrances. Within, the Valentino leadership was assembled. 3 principal brothers, their advisors, and their enforcers. Moretti, Vincent, the eldest brother, offered a greeting devoid of warmth. "To the widow Cross, our condolences on your loss." A tic manifested in Evelyn's jaw, but she gave a rigid acknowledgement. Luca escorted her to her chair, a public display of deference before seating himself. Let us dispense with the pleasantries, Luca initiated. Your contention is that the marital pact is broken. I dispute that claim. State your case. Vincent slid a file over the lacquered table. The contract guaranteed Richard Cross's security as part of this alliance. You terminated him. That action is a breach. Richard was the first to break the pact by contracting an assassin for a public assault, an attack which, I will note, also jeopardized your own kin. Luca produced his own dossier. Documentation, transactions, and affidavits, all demonstrating Richard engineered the conspiracy to provoke conflict. He posed a danger to everyone. I neutralized that danger without our authorization. I need no one's permission to defend my wife. Luca's tone was even, carrying a subtext of absolute certainty. The agreement connects our families via this marriage. The marriage is valid. Evelyn is my spouse. The pact, therefore, remains active unless she, and she alone, chooses to terminate it. The youngest, Anthony, interjected. She might allege coercion, trauma, that you killed her father, and she now fears you. Every individual in the room redirected their attention to her. She experienced the psychic weight of their collective gaze, an attempt to induce a failure of nerve and nullify the agreement. Instead, she calmly retrieved her device, typed with deliberation, and offered the display for Vincent to articulate to the group. He read it, his expression stiffening. He read the text in a flat tone. My father engineered his own destruction. He orchestrated my murder for personal advantage. My husband preserved my life. The only individuals I find threatening here are those who view me as a strategic asset. The union is valid. The pact is binding. Any objection to this is an issue to be taken up with me, not with my husband. The subsequent silence was profound and absolute. Vincent's siblings shared a meaningful look. Their advisor spoke with urgency. Yet Evelyn remained impassive, her composure a bastion against internal fragmentation. Finally, Vincent smiled. It was a gesture without warmth, but it communicated a reluctant admiration. You possess fortitude, Mrs. Moretti. I concede that point. He turned back to Luca. The pact remains, but we require amendments to its terms. We demand a larger stake in the waterfront project and quarterly audits for oversight. The audits are acceptable. The waterfront terms are not open for discussion. Luca leaned back, assuming a dominant posture. I can, however, offer you the right of first refusal on the new South Boston project. The potential earnings are equivalent, with fewer political complications. The bargaining continued for an hour, settling matters of great consequence. She stayed a silent, symbolic authority, her presence the ultimate endorsement. As they prepared to depart, Vincent stopped them. Mrs. Moretti, a moment. Luca tensed, but Evelyn acquiesced. Vincent led her away, his tone muted and private. I was acquainted with your father for 2 decades. An intelligent man who made catastrophic decisions, motivated by a self-destructive hubris that prevented him from seeking aid. Vincent's stare was keen and analytical. You do not share his flaws. You can discern when to concede, when to stand firm, and when to leverage partnerships. That trait is a significant asset. She composed a response. Is that a commendation or a caution? It is both. A slight smile appeared. Your husband is constructing a new kind of enterprise, one that could reorder the entire structure. The old guard largely considers him a fool, but I believe he possesses the shrewdness to succeed, especially with you as his advisor. For what reason are you sharing this? Because I have daughters, and I would wish for someone to explain the realities of the environment they were born into. He looked at Luca, who observed them with clear suspicion. He is a dangerous individual, your husband, yet he operates by a moral framework most of us have discarded. This makes him unusual. Do not underestimate that quality. She nodded, grasping the substance of Vincent's gesture. It was analysis, a new viewpoint, an understanding based not on commerce, but on a mutual survival instinct. In the vehicle following this meeting, Luca inquired about her conversation with Vincent. She recounted his unusual evaluation. Dangerous, yet principled. She deemed it plausible, as Vincent had no incentive for deception. Luca acknowledged her logic and praised the resilience she displayed under duress. She admitted to a paradoxical fusion of fear and empowerment, a feeling he appeared to comprehend completely. She described a sense of depersonalization, but viewed this emergent persona as a required adaptation. Her previous self was a survivor. This new iteration was learning to exert control, a shift she understood as vital. The subject processed the seismic disruption to her life's trajectory. A mere 21 days ago, her existence was defined by paternal subjugation. Now, as the consort to a criminal oligarch, she had successfully navigated confrontations with dominant males. This illogical and extreme transformation failed to elicit a fear response. She reframed this metamorphosis as the realization of a preordained identity. The subsequent period established a peculiar rhythm of domesticity. The subject developed an attachment to her niece, Emma, and instructed her sibling, Sarah, in nonverbal communication, thereby carving out a controlled personal domain. Luca initiated a community-facing venture, assigning Evelyn a significant executive function. Their shared existence was becoming an intricate, unpredicted construct. Nevertheless, traumatic residue persisted, presenting as nocturnal visions of weaponry in the paternal figure, an unhealed psychic lesion. Luca functioned as her primary anchor amid the psychic turmoil, providing consistent reinforcement of her security. 60 days post-union, the subject experienced a significant internal realignment. Observing him in the morning light, a perfected image, confirmed the evolution of her affective state as he acknowledged her. In response to his inquiry about residual trauma from a recent violent event, she executed a strategic deflection, proposing to restart her occupation as a sign language instructor. Countering his skepticism, she repositioned her aphonia not as a deficit, but as a pedagogical asset, confessing fatigue with a marginalized existence. His expression registered profound admiration and approval. He ceded full authority for the project to her. The subject then stated her intent to engage in targeted trauma therapy. He endorsed this act of self-reclamation with a display of affection and verbal affirmation. Her inquiry regarding his own therapeutic history remained unanswered. The silence was an admission. Upon further prompting, he conceded a need for clinical intervention. She proposed they address their conjoined history through couples counseling. He deflected with morbid humor regarding their shared pathology before closing the physical distance. To construct a stable future from their violent inception, he consented to joint therapy. They engaged a Dr. Chen, a clinician whose composure was unaffected by their narratives of brutality. The initial focus was Evelyn's primary wounds: paternal death, aphonia, 13 years of nullification, and the fundamental mistrust inherent in their union. Both subjects were conditioned by an environment where vulnerability was fatal. The therapeutic process was a traumatic excavation. The female subject reported feeling psychologically excoriated, while the male subject manifested his distress as contained somatic rage. This intervention gradually transmuted a survival contract into the fragile architecture of a marital bond. 6 months into the union, Luca returned displaying poorly concealed anxiety. Evelyn, engaged in a domestic task, demonstrated high sensitivity to his internal state and moved to provide support. His initial denial presented as a conditioned automatic defense mechanism. He self-corrected, identifying the source of his agitation: a proposal from federal agents. In exchange for intelligence on 3 rival organizations, they would receive total legal immunity. The term clean slate provoked a significant nonverbal reaction from Evelyn. Her expression served as a nonverbal inquiry into his response. He had deferred the decision pending her consultation. He articulated his central conflict: the desire for legitimate existence against the primary taboo of becoming an informant. The subject then queried the associated risk, which he confirmed was severe. He detailed the required security measures, which included the option of total identity erasure. He then revealed his core motivation: ensuring future offspring would not inherit his violent milieu. He initially framed this aspiration for her before admitting his own deep need for an existence devoid of past trauma. He admitted a longing for stability, a state of peace his criminal environment precluded. The subject performed a detached risk-benefit analysis, contrasting mortal danger with the opportunity for a normative life. Considering their joint future and procreation, she issued a concise, unambiguous directive: accept the offer. He required a second confirmation to process the finality of the decision. She responded with a metaphor illustrating rebirth from destruction. The subsequent physical contact was not gentle, but an intense, appreciative gesture solidifying their agreement. The following year was tumultuous, as Luca's testimony dismantled 3 criminal dynasties. The couple endured verifiable threats against their lives, necessitating a 1-month relocation to a secure government facility. Concurrently, their legitimate enterprises flourished. A community center was inaugurated, and Luca's corporations expanded, recasting their public image as flawed yet credible philanthropists. A lasting psychological artifact was Luca's total disconnection from his former life, a residual threat requiring perpetual vigilance. Still, their new paradigm felt more substantial than its predecessor. 14 months post-nuptials, the subject experienced a cessation of her menstrual cycle. 3 positive diagnostic tests confirmed the pregnancy. The subject entered a state of deep introspection, considering the genetic and psychological legacy for the offspring. Upon Luca's return, she presented the tests without comment, inducing a protracted, significant silence from him. His response was a forceful, physical embrace of notable intensity. Inquiring about her state, she acknowledged fear, but also resolve. He then disclosed a profound phobia of fatherhood, rooted in the pathological model set by his own sire. The subject proposed a unified approach to this challenge. He emitted a raw, fractured laugh, followed by weeping. The information was disseminated at a routine family meal. His sibling Sarah produced a vocalization of extreme joy, initiating a cascade of emotional responses. Ben, her partner, offered a nonverbal expression of warmth that resolved a final interpersonal rift. Sarah articulated an idealized projection from the child's life, a narrative of flawless development. Luca interrupted this fantasy with a sardonic comment suggesting the infant would exhibit innate hypervigilance. Sarah immediately reframed this potential pathology as a unique familial asset. The gestation period was characterized by medical complications and persistent low-level anxiety regarding fetal viability. Luca adopted a posture of hypervigilance at all medical consultations, sublimating his anxiety into the solitary, precise task of constructing the nursery. At 8 months gestation, the subject experienced a significant cognitive restructuring. She began to recontextualize her traumatic history, the forced union, the violence, her father's killing, not as meaningless brutality, but as a torturous, necessary path to her current state. The subject initiated a discussion of their violent relational origins. Luca confessed deep remorse for the detached, contractual nature of their union's start, verbalizing a fantasy of having met in a normative context, free from a traumatic foundation. He then retracted this wish, proposing their respective psychological wounds were uniquely complementary, a compatibility only their shared violent history could expose. He specified regret for her suffering, but not for its outcome. She responded that the trauma was now an integrated part of her identity. The subject asserted she would alter no component of her personal history. He prompted a self-definition. She described her current identity as characterized by comfort in silence, an immutable sense of self-worth, and an ability to command social spaces regardless of threat. She added her intent to instruct their offspring that vocalization has multiple forms, each with its own agency. Luca expressed quiet admiration for her ongoing evolution, citing it as the reason for his intensifying affection. The subject concluded the exchange with a nonverbal sign of complete rapport. He located her on the bed, joining her amongst the disassembled crib components. They remained in physical contact, sensing the fetus between them, considering a future deemed improbable, idealized, and of ultimate value. The infant was delivered on a February night, 3 weeks premature. The infant was named Catherine Rose, in homage to grandmothers known only through narrative. Upon receiving the child from the nurse, the subject experienced a profound instinctual wave of affection. This new life, exhibiting paternal eyes and her own resolute jawline, was tangible evidence of their struggle, a creation born from ruin. Luca remained at the bedside, one hand on the subject's shoulder, the other tracing the infant's minute fingers. He exhibited lacrimation and an expression of profound disbelief. "We created a person," he verbalized, "a complete human." The subject's smile indicated both extreme fatigue and deep contentment. She manipulated her mobile device with one hand, typing, "We created a family." "Yes," he affirmed, "we did." He made contact with his lips to her forehead, then Catherine's. "My life's purpose will be to ensure you both feel loved, secure, and desired. All I was denied. All I was also denied. The cycle terminates here," he pledged. 1 hour later, Sarah and Ben arrived with Emma, now a toddler exhibiting locomotion and idiosyncratic speech. She elevated herself to view the bassinet, her expression one of wonder. "Baby," she declared, "my baby." "Your cousin," Sarah gently amended. "You will be an excellent elder cousin, right?" Emma nodded gravely before commencing a lengthy vocalization directed at Catherine. Later that night, with visitors gone and the infant asleep, Luca joined the subject in the narrow hospital bed, dismissing a nurse's warning about structural limits. "Your cognitions?" he inquired quietly. Too fatigued for manual input, she presented her phone where a message was already composed. "My thoughts are on our trajectory. From a contractual obligation to this state, from antagonists to co-parents, from mere survival to an emotional state approximating joy. 2 years prior, this outcome would have been assessed as impossible. I now recognize that despite the significant pain, I would not alter the sequence of events that brought me here to you and to her." He processed her text twice, his physiology betraying significant emotional stimulus. Setting the device aside, he initiated physical contact, carefully navigating the medical apparatus attached to her recovering form. "My presence in your lives is undeserved," he articulated, "but I will dedicate my existence to rectifying that fact. This unit, this new operational phase." She responded with 2 distinct taps to his chest. This was their established nonverbal signifier for "I love you," a conditioned response for circumstances where verbalization was insufficient or impossible. He reciprocated the gesture, a familiar cadence established over months. The subject's future remained a variable, compromised by Luca's behavioral history. Yet for the first time, Evelyn exhibited a notable absence of her previous pervasive anxiety. Her influence was no longer vocal, but manifest in her behaviors, decisions, and the family unit she was constructing. Her partner identified this emergent strength and conditioned her to deploy it. The offspring would be raised to understand silence as a strategic tool that attachment presents in many forms, and that true alliances are chosen, not merely inherited. Approximately 3 months later, the community center commenced operations. Evelyn's sign language course began with 15 subjects, a heterogeneous group motivated by a need for connection. The facility provided vocational training, therapy, and education, a controlled environment for individuals, like them, who had been socially marginalized. Luca's discourse on second chances and civic responsibility was delivered with calculated impact, a potent narrative from a subject forged by extreme antisocial conditioning. The mayor and city officials observed their attendance a hard-won gesture of social acceptance. From periphery, Evelyn held Catherine, monitoring her husband as he repurposed their fractured history into a foundation for others. As the applause subsided, his gaze locked onto hers across the room, projecting intense adoration. The moment was interrupted by a local journalist requesting a statement on their new philanthropic venture. After Luca handled the inquiries, the reporter addressed Evelyn. "Mrs. Moretti, regarding the signing class you are instructing, could you articulate its personal significance?" Evelyn retrieved her phone, input a response, and displayed it. "A traumatic event removed my vocal capacity 13 years ago. For an extended period, I allowed that silence to define my identity. But silence is its own communication system. One must only learn to decode it. I instruct so others may discover their own methods of being perceived, because every individual merits a voice, whether articulated or not." As the reporter recited her statement for the camera, Evelyn experienced a profound cognitive shift. This was her agency, manifested not through sound, but through action, more subtle, yet infinitely more potent. That evening in the penthouse, with Catherine sedated by sleep, Luca escorted Evelyn to the terrace overlooking the city's illuminated grid. The vista was unchanged, but their position within it had been fundamentally altered. "I arrived at a conclusion today," he stated, drawing her close. "We did more than survive. We synthesized something new from the ruins. We constructed a sanctuary from a state of savagery. We elevated a transactional arrangement into a covenant." Pressed against him, she typed her own analysis. "And our development is ongoing." Precisely, that is the core principle. Perfection is not the objective. The process is to reaffirm this path repeatedly, to choose mutual growth. I choose you on a daily basis, particularly through conflict. He turned her with deliberation, framing her face with his hands. "My choice is also you. You, Catherine, and any impending threat. This is my safe harbor. This is the asset I will defend. You are the locus of my world." Her mouth met his, there on the balcony that was once her confinement and now their refuge. The metropolis extended below, a dynamic network of infinite potential and latent hostility inhabited by millions of organisms. Across this matrix, countless others were engaged in decisions that would dictate their futures. In that instance, Evelyn solidified her commitment to her vow, her partner, and the complex, stimulating existence she had engineered from the remnants of her past. Her progenitor had relegated her to a marginal role. A violent impact had neutralized her voice. The external world seemed engineered for her nullification, yet she resisted. In stillness, she cultivated resolve. Through her own volition, she seized control, and in a highly improbable context, a deep-seated attachment. She was more than a survivor. She had become a fixed entity, a partner, a guardian, a leader, the sole narrator of her case file. The silent subject had developed a new communication modality, a language not of acoustics but of potent intent. Her new voice was the life she constructed, the family she protected, and the future she controlled. This awareness, as Catherine vocalized in her sleep while Luca held her under the stars, was more than sufficient. It was a state of psychological grace.